Welcome back to Proxam, everybody, and today we're going to be looking at Hail of Doom, but we're not going to be looking at how good Hail of Doom is. We're actually going to be looking at the problem with it and the problems that have existed with it since the Nephilim expansion. So we're going to be looking at taking a step back from the ultra-competitive far-flung Craftworld trait and be basically discussing why Hail of Doom isn't as good as it seems on paper in a lot of scenarios. But before we get into that, I do want to address what's happened to this channel in the last week. So as some of you might know, but many of you probably don't, I was recently the victim of a hack. Slanesh got me, guys. It happens, I guess. But basically what happened was the hacker, probably seeing that I was getting close to 1,000 subscribers, wanted to hack my account to either monetize or try to get some money out of it. I don't know what, get my information. But basically steal my account for personal or financial use. Once the said hacker found out that, oh, this person isn't monetized, this person actually makes no money on YouTube, they quickly, instead of, returning it like a decent, criminal would do, they instead decided to delete the account. Basically, all traces of their existence and my account's existence. So unfortunately, all my content was lost. But I am committed to re-uploading all the old content as well as creating new content for you guys. The most important thing for me isn't the subscribers or the likes or any of that kind of stuff, but being able to show you this stuff so that hopefully you guys can improve as players and maybe get some inspiration as to what to do next with your Eldar army. So that's going to remain my goal. That's going to remain basically my mission when it comes to creating Eldar content for you guys. All right, so moving on to the video, we are going to be talking about Hail of Doom and why it's probably not as good as people think it is anymore. So a quick overview of what we're going to be looking at in this video. We're going to be looking at Hail of Doom and what makes it so powerful, why people like playing Hail of Doom, first and foremost. Then we're going to be looking at what you lose in exchange for taking Hail of Doom as your Craftworld trait. And lastly, we're going to be looking at why the Craftworld Eldar community needs to take a step back and reevaluate Hail of Doom in competitive play, which is one thing that I'm committed to in talking about in this video, is why I think Hail of Doom is maybe not the greatest trait anymore, especially with all the things that you exchange when selecting it as one of your far-flung traits, or I should say the only far-flung trait, right? All right, so let's get right into it. So looking at Hail of Doom, it's clear to see that Hail of Doom is extremely powerful on its own, right? It massively increases the power of shuriken weapons by basically making 6s to hit auto wound, and because of the shuriken special rule, count as a 6, granting a -2 AP from that said rule, which basically makes the army able to shred through armor and get past all sorts of toughness barriers. So under normal circumstances, a unit like Dire Avengers that wouldn't be able to take out, let's say, a vehicle would now be able to not only threaten the vehicle, but actually have a decent chance with a combination of Guide and Doom to actually destroy that vehicle. So things like a Lehman Russ, things like that could be under threat by something with Hail of Doom, potentially. So it's really clear to see why Hail of Doom is such a popular Craftworld trait, because it essentially makes units that would normally not be able to deal with certain targets able to eliminate those targets with peak efficiency. And not only that, some of the best units in our codex carry shuriken weapons, making them even more efficient. So units like Dire Avengers, Wind Riders carry shuriken weaponry, and basically Hail of Doom makes them that much more powerful. I mean, these units are already good on their own. Now they're even more powerful with this trait. And again, it gets around a lot of the things that make enemies harder to kill. So any ability that hinders the wound roll, a -1 to the wound roll, or just really high toughness is not going to be affected by this. And lastly, it's really easy to build a list around Hail of Doom, because knowing that your shurikens can take out tanks and monsters means you can invest a lot less points in anti-large damage. So that means fire prisms, which are fairly expensive, D cannons. You don't really need these tools in your army, because guess what? Your Dire Avengers can do the job. Your Wind Riders can do the job. Basically, any shuriken weapon in your army can threaten tanks. But you do exchange a lot for using Hail of Doom. So the things you exchange for using this powerful trait are a second Craftworld trait, which post-nerf you can't, use Hail of Doom in combination with any other far-flung trait. You give up the access to unique relics, warlord traits, and stratagems that come along with the named Craftworlds. You give up list versatility in the types of units and options you can take. The units that do work well with Hail of Doom typically don't have as much staying power or toughness. And lastly, shuriken weapons are notoriously short-range weapons. So you do give up weapon range as well. So again, the first thing you're giving up is the fact that you don't get another Craftworld trait when you choose Hail of Doom. So this hinders your ability to combine it with other traits to increase damage even further, or make your army a little bit tougher and give you better coverage, or even cover other weaknesses like range. I know that the Superior Shurikens trait isn't that popular, but in a short range list that basically revolves around shuriken weapons, you might want to have something like that to give yourself a little bit more of an edge. And when it comes to the unique relics, warlord traits, and stratagems, the named Craftworlds have pretty unique and often really powerful relics, warlord traits, and stratagems that you're going to lose out on if you take Hail of Doom. And these, relics, warlord traits, and stratagems can win you games. So some of the cool and, most powerful ones, the Ghost Helm of Al-Shazir, which is basically the Uthway Psyker relic, which allows you to basically get undeniable 9+ psychic tests. Of course, those are unmodified. And Wrath of the Shrines is also a very good one. Gives you exploding 6s to hit on aspect warrior units. That's for the BL-Tan. And then Fate Reader, of course, is a warlord trait from the Uthway, which gives you an additional Strands of Fate dice per turn, which is extremely useful. And those are just to name a few. There's so many other special relics and warlord traits and stratagems that are extremely powerful from other Craftworlds. And Hail of Doom, you're not going to have access to this. Then, of course, comes list versatility and options. So Hail of Doom lists look notoriously similar to each other and don't have much variation. So Hail of Doom lists are all going to run a lot of Dire Avengers. They're going to run large contingents of Dire Avengers. They're going to run things like Warlocks, maybe a Farseer with a Cronus Bow combo, things like that. And there's not going to be a lot of variation in between. You're not going to see lists that have different weapons like scatter lasers or Eldar missile launchers or things like that generally. So again, weapons that work really well in certain matchups like scatter lasers won't typically be included, which can be a big problem. And again, also units that don't have shurikens or utility. Of course, units like Swooping Hawks will always fit in a Hail of Doom list because Swooping Hawks are great at objectives, right? Rangers are great at objectives and you kind of need them for troops. But other than that, you're not going to see a lot of units outside of that range. So you really won't see units like Wraith Blades or Wraith Guard or any of those kind of things that don't fit within that scope in a Hail of Doom list. And this may not seem like that big of a deal because maybe those units aren't so great in a Hail of Doom list anyway, right? Or maybe they're not so great in a list like BL-Tan even. But they could be useful in other types of lists. I know that for a fact Wraith Guard can be very effective in certain matchups, and also Wraith Blades can also be very good in certain matchups. And not having those options available is a little bit of a hindrance, and it is something to consider when thinking about building a Hail of Doom list. And the next thing is also staying power, right? Hail of Doom lists have absolutely no survivability buffs. Their units that they take are typically very squishy and very front-loaded, so they're very heavily, geared towards dealing damage. Dire Avengers, Wind Riders, both don't really hold well under fire. They're very squishy, and they don't survive very well, even though the Wind Riders are a little bit tougher. And also the shorter range of shuriken weapons could be a liability when going all in. So if you're going all in on something, you need to get kind of close, and then that opens you up for a lethal counterattack. Because again, you have no survivability, so it's very glass cannon. And lastly, we have weapon range. So again, shurikens have fairly short range. They recently got a buff with the new codex to range 18, but they're still fairly short. Range 18 is not a long range. Now, it does help that Eldar are pretty fast, but again, having that short range means that you initially, in the shooting phase, need to be within that range of an enemy unit. Even with battle focus, unless you're going behind a piece of terrain, it's not necessarily going to get you out of bolter range. And this can really put a lot of units into a position where they can't reach their targets as effectively after their initial assault and be more susceptible to return fire after their initial attacks. Because again, even Fire and Fade or Battle Focus, unless you're moving behind a piece of obscuring terrain, you're not going to be able to get out of range of any anti-infantry tech that could be coming your way. So, it's my opinion that the Craftworld Eldar community needs to kind of take a step back and reevaluate Hail of Doom in competitive play. And here's why. I think Hail of Doom is great for damage, but you lose a lot of other benefits and it limits you in terms of options. You really don't have that many options in a Hail of Doom list outside of a couple of key units and maybe a few variances in the utility units that you choose to score on objectives with. And, not only on this channel, but, throughout the Eldar community, when the Codex first came out, a lot of you guys probably could see how stifling and how overwhelming the amount of support for Hail of Doom was, right? Basically, every single competitive player that was playing in tournaments was playing some variation of Hail of Doom, with very few exceptions. So I think that the power of Hail of Doom initially has stifled the competitive community from basically looking at anything else which might be more effective. Now, this has changed in the past couple of weeks since the Nephilim drop. And how it's basically changed is a lot of players are reevaluating it and coming to the conclusion that, oh, wait a second, maybe Hail of Doom isn't exactly the best type of competitive list out there for Craftworld Eldar. And we can kind of see that in the numbers, right? With Craftworld Eldar being at about a 46% win rate, down from about a 51% win rate, it's pretty clear that the vast majority of Hail of Doom lists are not pulling their weight in tournaments anymore. And this is because Hail of Doom isn't really the best, to be honest with you, isn't the best kind of competitive list out there right now. And there are many reasons for this, but I think one of the primary reasons is that Eldar have harder matchups now with the newer codexes that are coming out, right? We have Tyranids, which Hail of Doom works okay against Tyranids, that's true, but Tyranids hit very hard, and Hail of Doom lists don't have a lot of survivability to fight back against mortal wounds and things like that, for one. For two, Chaos Demons, right? Chaos Demons are basically running the tournaments right now. They have a very high win rate, and they have very powerful units. And one of the best things about Demons is their demonic save ability. And again, demonic saves don't really care about the AP of your weapons. So Hail of Doom basically it loses half of its effectiveness against demonic armies. So could be another reason why Hail of Doom is not doing so well right now in general. And with the new Imperial Guard Codex coming out, I just feel like Hail of Doom is going to be in even a worse place. Because yeah, it'll be good against their tanks, but against their infantry, it's not going to really do much more than a regular Shuriken Catapult couldn't do on its own, right? Guard have very low armor. They're not going to have their armor buffs, guys. There's probably still going to be armor 5+, let's be honest. They're Imperial Guardsmen. And again, unless you're targeting their tanks, Hail of Doom units like Dire Avengers or Wind Riders just aren't going to make up their points right away. Even against Imperial Guardsmen, they're fairly squishy, right? So I think that as we go forward and as we see new codexes coming out, Hail of Doom is going to become increasingly less effective. On the other hand, weapons like scatter lasers or units like D-cannon support weapons are going to be much better in those matchups, especially against demons and things like that. Tyranids as well are going to be much better in those matchups than a Hail of Doom list would ever be. And when it comes to Necrons and Sisters of Battle, unfortunately, even though Hail of Doom is great at taking out their armor, what it's not so good at is dealing with their excellent objective control. So Sisters of Battle and Necrons have excellent objective control, and honestly, Hail of Doom lists just can't compete with the secondaries. They just can't. Even if you kill a majority of their army, you're still going to lose on secondary points typically, right? So again, whether you're talking about overall damage in different matchups or you're talking about your objective control in different matchups, Hail of Doom just doesn't quite get there anymore. It just doesn't quite get there. It did get there at the beginning of the Codex when all the units were cheaper and you could take a second Craftworld trait and things like that. But now with the addition of more new codexes, the Nephilim changes, etc., it's just not holding up. So in conclusion, while I still think Hail of Doom is a great trait, and as I think any ability would be that allows you to roll a 6 to hit and grant you an auto wound with additional AP is, I really don't think it's as great as it once was after the nerfs. And honestly, nowadays, I think it leaves much to be desired. And because of that, as a community, I think we should start looking into other powerful trait combinations or craft rolls, as I believe many of them are stronger overall. And if you look at Uthway, for example, and the recent success that Uthway has had in many grand tournaments, you will see that, yes, Uthway is an alternative and it's a very powerful craft roll, and it's much more well-rounded than Hail of Doom is. And there's other ones as well that I don't even think the competitive community is looking at that might be sleeper factions. To give you an example, a lot of people, when the Codex came out, myself included, took a look at Shroud Runners and thought, they're not that great. They're not the best unit out there. But after the changes, all of a sudden, people are looking at Shroud Runners in a different way. And in fact, they've made their way into several highly competitive tournament lists, right? So Shroud Runners are an example of that. So if Shroud Runners can do that, then why can't other craft rolls, right? Why can't a Laytalk or Beal Tan, with a couple of tweaks and a couple of maybe, kind of looking at them a little bit deeper, why can't they be super competitive as well? And I do think, by the way, this is, again, probably just my position on this, but I do think Beal Tan is in a position to be one of the strongest craft rolls out of the main craft roll group because of many reasons, but just because of the fact that they have very high damage that can be comparable with Hail of Doom, in addition to having all of the access to warlord traits, stratagems, and of course, relics. And by the way, the Beal Tan stratagem, Wrath of the Shrines, is perhaps one of the best in the entire game, especially when combined with powerful aspect warrior units. So this is definitely a craft world that I think people have been sleeping on because of a number of reasons, but I think that could be very effective going forward, perhaps with a new outlook and a couple of tweaks in the new balanced data slate that is coming out, I think at the end of this month, if I'm not mistaken, but it might be out later. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. Hope you guys think a little bit about this. I know a lot of you out there love Hail of Doom and have been running. I have a Hail of Doom list myself that I haven't really run in over a month now, but that I enjoyed when the book came out. And I understand, it's hard to make changes and so forth, but as a community, I think we really need to start thinking a little bit outside the box when it comes to our builds and stuff like that. Because again, 46% win rate, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that for a long time, the competitive community was just gripping on for dear life. Oh, Hail of Doom, I'm still going to run Hail of Doom, even after the nerfs. And I think, honestly, it just doesn't work as well as they think. So I think we need to think a little bit outside the box and be a little bit more creative. I mean, we are Eldar players. We are typically more creative people than the usual. And I don't mean that in a negative way at all. I just think that because we're Craftworld Eldar players, we were searching for something different in the first place, right? We didn't want to play the Space Marines, which are basically 90% of the armies out there. We wanted something different, and I think we can use that mentality that we came in with to come up with some really fantastic alternatives to Hail of Doom within the competitive Craftworld Eldar scene. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. I'll see you guys later. And once again, thanks for watching. I know it's kind of a bummer that my account got hacked and everything, but thank you for continuing to support those of you who are watching. I will continue to make new content as long as people are watching it, and probably even after. Even if there's 0 people watching it, I'll probably still be creating content. So just so it's out there in the universe. All right, everybody, peace out. I'll see you guys later, and have a good one.